I think I got my first watch, a Casio, with a built-in calculator in the 1980s. Since the late 90s, I've consistently owned multiple watches. I think it was around the 2000s when I started considering myself a real watch collector or enthusiast. I still need to look up the benefits of a column wheel chronograph because it hasn't quite stuck yet. I'm still no expert, but I've learned some things and I've made some mistakes as a watch collector. So if you're new to this journey, these are some of the things I've learned that I wanted to share. Let's dive in. This is a money thing. I'm not loaded and I wasn't born loaded. When I started collecting, I definitely wasn't loaded. So I bought most of my watches in the space I considered affordable at the time. Of course, you shouldn't be buying watches that aren't affordable to you, but that's not the point. The point is, very early, I knew that I wanted an IWC Pilot, but I couldn't afford one. So I had a Leica, and I had a Stover, and another Leica. And for me, they never scratched the itch. Get the watch you're itching for and not the substitute. For other people, the Leica will never feel like a substitute. But for me, it felt like it. This might be a me thing, but in the beginning, I at least wasn't sure what kind of watches I actually liked. I know that sounds silly, but when you're new to this, people are going to say you need a dress watch and a diver and an integrated bracelet watch and a G-Shock and a field watch and a luxury watch and a beta and it just keeps going. I made the mistake of thinking that I had to start a collection with having one of each. So I spent a lot of money initially buying all sorts of watches to try them out. This did teach me to some extent about what I liked and what I didn't like. So, I like divers and I don't wear dress watches that much. But doing it by buying, even if it is a quartz CWC field watch, adds up. It's an expensive way to figure out what your taste is. Over time, I figured out more organically, and just looking at watches again and again in the store or online is just as useful and a lot cheaper than buying them every single time. I've said this before. I'm quite the style icon, as are all middle-aged men like me. So just keep that in mind when I'm saying this. When it comes to your watch, think of what you wear and consider how the watch fits in. If you're considering buying a watch to wear to work, go to the AD in your work clothes. Don't just look at the watch in that little flip mirror that they always have. Find a full-length mirror somewhere in the store, stick your hand in your pocket and see what the watch looks like with your clothing. There's no right or wrong. It's not style advice, and no, I'm not really a style icon, but just check and see how you feel it looks to you. Be critical. Maybe that orange Doxa feels cool to you, but if you're a gray and black clothing kind of person, then just consider how that watch will always stand out in your outfit. If that's what you're going for, cool, but just check. I want you to largely ignore lug-to-lug measurements. Just wear the watch. Lugs can be long and straight, they can be curved, they can be stubby, cases can be super thin, the case back can be a full-on bubble back. Don't assume that 52 millimeters lug-to-lug is too big for you. Wear it. That's the only way you know. Also, don't trust that photo that everybody takes with their camera on their phone. On the screen right now, you should have two pictures. It's the same watch, it's the same wrist. The difference is the focal length of the lens. On picture one, the watch, to me at least, looks too big. On picture two, looks fine. And even if it doesn't fit, even in some sort of theoretical definition, wear it if you'd like it. Asking people if it's too big for your wrist is fine, but make up your own mind. And also, try to wear a shirt or something long-sleeved. The over-the-cuff and under-the-cuff experience is important to test. I'm a bit of a strap hoarder, so I've got way more straps than I ever use. Options are cool, but I think if you really need all those options, again, generally, I just suggest a more organic approach. Just don't buy this whole long lineup of different stuff that you think you're going to use. Figure out along what you actually intend to use. Maybe I'm obsessive compulsive, but dials and dial accents have a huge impact on whether or not a strap works with the watch. The Tudor Alinghi is this mix of black, blue, and red, and it massively limits what works strap-wise with the watch. On the other hand, a Pelagos FXD, it has almost no color, and instantly you've got a whole lot more leeway. Black dials with brown leather straps often feel weird, or at least to me. So go to the sites that sell straps and check out the examples of what works and what doesn't. At some point, you are going to need a teeny tiny screwdriver, some extra spring bars, and a spring bar tool. Be careful with pretty much everything else. Watch rolls, watch winders specifically. You don't really need them. They take up a lot of space. They do have advantages in terms of the watch always being ready to go, but it's one of those things that I think a lot of people buy because that's what you do, and then end up getting rid of it because they don't use it as often as they thought and it took up too much space. It doesn't matter what price range you're in. Get a system to track your warranties, your papers, and your other documents. And also, take a picture of your watch. Store all of it somewhere so you have it available when you need it. You don't want to get into an argument with an AD about whether or not the warranty still applies or not. Make up your own mind about Rolex. Right now, there are 4 dominant opinions about Rolex that you'll hear. Regardless of which one you hear, they're likely to be shouted at you in all caps. One is Rolex is overpriced crap, it's overhyped and not worth it. 2 is Rolex is this ultimate mass-produced watch and is superior to all other mass-market brands. They have a huge legacy and they are understandably desirable. Then there's Rolex is for posers or insecure people who are just status hogs. Finally, Rolex hates its customers and they are intentionally creating false demand and you shouldn't support them. If you like Rolex, you like Rolex. If you don't, you don't. Spending time caring about what other people think or trying to tell people how they should view Rolex is unnecessary. Don't listen to people. If you're online, at least, you're going to bounce into people with very strong opinions in general. The opinions range from Tudor's great to Tudor is just for people that can't afford Rolex. It goes from people that buy expensive watches are inherently shallow to people that buy replica watches are just poors that are bitter that they can't afford the good watches. Generally, the watch community is super positive, but there are those all caps kind of people that just spout unpleasantries. Ignore them, buy what you like. Once you've got a collection, you'll inevitably have watches that you never use. Learn to sell them. I've got a strict 1 in, 1 out policy. You don't have to, but learn to sell when there's something that's just gathering dust. If you're keeping it because of some personal significance, then of course that's a different story. But if it's just a watch that you're not using anymore, sell it. Somebody else is going to enjoy it. I think you need to learn fast that sometimes the idea of the watch is more compelling than the watch itself. This happens a lot with hyped watches. You kind of get caught up in this vortex of hype and you almost feel you should be buying this or that watch. Generally, I'd say don't impulse buy. John Mayer can buy watches in the airport with a hangover. You shouldn't. Consider why you're interested. Is it just hype, or is it the desire to have something new, or is it the actual watch? This is a nitty-gritty one. Sort your end links. Label them in bags. When you've got one bag full of oyster-style end links and you don't know which one fits the Rolex or the Tudor or the Hamilton or the Steinhardt, you are going to cry. Sort them, label them. You have to be your own nerd. There's no right way to be a watch enthusiast. I understand a little bit about movements. I know how a movement works. I can tell if it's finished well, and I can to some extent spot some things that are hand done versus machine made. But I'm not a movement guy. There are people that are down in the weeds about that kind of stuff. People that are like, oh, see this thing that was pioneered by Breguet and the Breguet's cousin's sister twice removed. And that's cool. I've learned that it's not a measure of being a more cultured collector that you can recite Rolex or AP reference numbers back to 1952. If you've got an interest in those things, then cool. But there's no such thing as the right way to be a collector. There are people that love to gatekeep and they'll test you, but just ignore them. It's not worth it. Make up your own shibboleth. Just because something is cheap or cheaper doesn't mean it's always better value. Value is not just the sum of the cost of the components that go into a watch. Value is a subjective term and it's individual. A $58,000 Lange & Söhne that loses 50% of its retail price the instant it leaves the store may be of a lot of value to you. Conversely, a Hamilton Khaki Quartz for $400 might be terrible value because you never wear it. Value's not objective. Expensive does not equal better all the time. I stand by this statement with massive conviction. Just because it's more expensive does not make it better for you. The experience you have with a watch is individual and it's subjective. I honestly prefer the Pelagos 39 over the RLX Titanium. The resale value for the RLX is higher. The movement is arguably better. The QC is arguably better. Lots of material things make it a better watch. I just don't like it as much. I think the total package of the Pelagos 39 is better. There are some watches that you're supposed to love. It's the Moonwatch, it's the Explorer, it's the 50 Fathoms, it's the Nautilus. It's a long list. I actually bought an Explorer once because a real watch nerd has to own an Explorer. And I never wore the thing. It took me 10 years before I started to like the Moonwatch. If one of those icons don't click with you, you just don't like it. It might change, but don't pressure yourself to drink Fanabanca Menta because one of your buddies told you that real men drink Fanabanca Menta. Be open. Maybe mid-century Rolex dive watches are the only thing you care about. Cool. Maybe Chinese replicas are 100% your jam. But generally I say, be open to different experiences. I'm not telling you at all what to buy or to buy something that you don't like, but challenge yourself and allow yourself to be open to different perspectives. Maybe that JLC might grow on you. Maybe you've got a safe full of Pateks and Moses and Langers, but try a Baltic. The higher the price of the watch, the less extra you're going to get for the watch. A Rolex is objectively better than some Chinese replica. Anybody saying anything else online is just wrong. A Rolex is also 20 times more expensive potentially, but it's not 20 times better. It just isn't. Diminishing returns kick in, and once you get into Rolex and AP and Vacheron, you are not getting proportionally more for the price you pay. But make no mistake, you are getting more. It's just not linear. That's just the nature of luxury. That's how it is. Personally, I actually have the controversial opinion that marketing and brand have a value, so I'm mostly fine with it. But I'm typically more critical of expensive brands than I am of cheaper brands, simply because I have high expectations. Don't be afraid to buy secondary. Do your research, of course, but buying secondary is generally quite safe and you can generally save money. So unless you've got this long-term goal of becoming a VIP customer at Bookerah or your local AD, then buy secondary. You can get new and used, and a lot of sites are out there where you can verify sellers. Specs aren't everything. Again, do your research, read up on movements and specs, and also watch and read opinions online, but don't get too hooked on specs. Watch movements have been around for 200 years, and the core mechanics of them haven't changed. A movement is an incredibly robust thing. And yes, some of them are better than others, but generally they're all going to work the way they promise. So if it says 38 hours and plus minus 15 seconds, you're likely going to get precisely that. There are great quartz watches out there. Just remember that. That's it. Some of the things I've learned. Hopefully they're useful for you. Do you have any other advice for new watch enthusiasts? Put them in the comments below. Like, subscribe. Cheers.